Let's take a look at the oscillator section in Twin 3. So I've loaded the default sound, which sounds like this. Pretty thick, pretty rich sound. I'm going to simplify this to the clean preset here. And that sounds a lot more simple. We just have one oscillator active. We do have this filter on. When I hover my cursor on this number 1 here, I can just click on the power button to turn off that filter. And now we're hearing the pure oscillator by itself. The controls are fairly simple. You can see here we have an on-off button for the oscillator. We have a drop-down for the different waveforms. We have tuning options here. So here we have semitone control. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to snap to semitone values. You can see it does go in between. But you can always double-click and type in a specific value. So if I type in 7 here, I can get it perfectly on 7 semitones. Also, holding down Command on a Mac and clicking on this parameter will reset it back to default. And that applies to pretty much all other controls. Feed control or octave control here. Fairly straightforward. Next, we have oscillator sync. So this oscillator can be synced to some kind of a hidden oscillator in the background, and you get that classic sync scream effect. It's also pretty cool how in the background you can see the actual oscilloscope. While over here you see the spectrum analyzer, see the frequency content of the sound. We have this MIDI option over here, so when I turn that on, well, technically it's not MIDI specifically, it just looks like a MIDI 5-pin connector. But as you can see here in the help option, which I have turned on right now, when I hover my cursor on this option, it gives us a little bit of information on this particular control. Now, to be honest, it's a very, very subtle control. It's a phase sync button. So when I play a note, the phase is synced every time a note on event is received. This is very, very subtle. So you may have to experiment by clicking and turning it on and off, depending on how much sync you have and how percussive your entire sound is. So I wouldn't spend too much time on this. We do have the classic sync effect over here, and that works great. And then finally, we have a level control over here. Now we also have a panning control just around this volume control knob. So I can choose to pan this oscillator as well. Again, I will hold down Command and click on it to reset it back to the default. We have this X option here to completely get rid of the oscillator, and now we have nothing loaded in. If I'd like to add oscillators, I can hit the plus button. I'll add a second one here. Let's set them both to exactly the same octave. So they're both 8 feet and everything else is identical. Now when I play a note, on a purely digital synthesizer, you would hear that the two oscillators are perfectly identical and you just hear a level change. But in this Twin 3, you should hear this phase interaction between the two oscillators. And you can see here activity in the spectrum analyzer. And that means there's a little bit of variation in the oscillators to kind of give it a little bit of that analog vibe. So we don't have to detune the oscillators, even though they're perfectly in tune. They already have a little bit of subtle change. But of course, I can detune it. And get more of that. Now, when you have two oscillators active, you get this button over here that's basically ring modulation. So when I turn this on, the volume control disappears for oscillator 2 because now we have the ring modulated signal going out of oscillator 1. It's still active because we do need the second oscillator to be active to multiply it with the first one. Changing the pitch will give you that classic, very metallic, dissonant ring mod style tones. Now we can choose to add more oscillators. Hit the plus button here. We have a third oscillator. You might think that since it's called Twin 3, it comes with 3 oscillators, but actually you get 4. So I have 4 oscillators active right now. I can change all the settings of these independently from each other. We can have ring mod active between 2 of these. So you get 2 pairs of ring modulation. Now let's talk about the different waveforms. It would be nice to have a solo button. We don't have that. Let me just turn off these other oscillators. focus just on the sawtooth. So that's the sawtooth waveform, odd and even harmonics. We have a square, but it's not a pure square. This is the pure square, where you get only odd harmonics. If I switch to the other square, you can see there's a little bit of even harmonics in there as well. Now, irrespective of which square waveform you choose, you get your pulse width control. You notice that this parameter wasn't there in the sawtooth. So that's nice. And the triangle, now this is not the pure triangle, this is the pure triangle, which also only has odd harmonics. But if we switch over to the other triangle, its harmonics are quieter, but it does seem to have some even harmonics as well. Then we have the pure sine wave, which is just the fundamental frequency. We have two noise options, white noise, pretty consistent across the frequency range, and then pink noise, which tends to have a bit more low frequency compared to the high end. Alright, so that is the oscillator section in Twin 3.